touring and really started to see how the broader music industry was working, and very quickly realized in Rhode Island, we did not have a music industry. We had very talented artists, no doubt about that, but there was no infrastructure to support that.
Right.
And I was on Warped Tour, which doesn't exist anymore, but was on Warped Tour, and we had photographers and videographers following us around.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to Bold Conscious Connections. My name is Raju Panjwani, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. So this channel is dedicated to exploring the journeys of visionary leaders, entrepreneurs, who really dare to follow their dreams, their passions, and create really impactful businesses. So if you're looking to become an entrepreneur or otherwise seeking inspiration to elevate your career, well, you're in the right place, my friend. Let me say, why do I do this? It's because, like you, I had a career over 25 years, and at some point, my desire to follow my own path just took over, and I quit my job about 20 years ago now. So on this channel, what I do is we delve into strategies, mindsets, stories behind the success of those that have done this before, like I have. So what I want you to do is hit the subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and join us on this exciting journey towards living boldly and consciously. Welcome, Lindsey Lerner, today. I have just gotten to know her through LinkedIn. I have never spoken with her in my life, so this is going to be a little breaking tradition. I'm not going to start describing who Lindsey is, but as I just said, force of nature is what I see. She stands her ground and just, I won't babble too much. But what I saw was your focus on sort of cross roads of creativity and strategy and storytelling. And it's funny that the work I do with my clients, I really am. I always say, the wealthiest place on this planet is the graveyard. So Please do not die with your gifts. And I think kind of what, when you start talking about your things that you were saying, don't, just go be who you are. I was like, oh my God, that's the person I want on my podcast. So welcome to Bold Conscious Connections, Lindsey.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be great.
All right. So as I said, I only know a little bit about you. So maybe you tell the audience not necessarily what you do, but who is Lindsey?
Sure. Yeah, not a problem. We'll jump right in. Yeah, at the moment, I live in New York, and I grew up in Rhode Island. And so in a lot of ways, it's the antithesis of where I grew up. The entire state of Rhode Island only has 1 million people, and now I'm just constantly surrounded by people all the time. So bit of a change, but happy to be here. And I spend a majority of my time getting to connect with incredible people like yourself. My favorite thing is to connect with people and then connect other people. And if I could just do that all day, every day, I would be thrilled. And thankfully, I've built my life around that. And so I do get to spend a majority of my time doing that, which is amazing.
So who you are is I don't mean your resume. I meant, what do you want people to understand when you walk into a room?
I think it does boil down to that. I think it's about being open to connection so that you can then connect with other people. I think that's the essence of it, and just maintaining that openness regardless of how uncomfortable that may be at times.
Right. Now, just a little bit of the background that I had. I launched something called Level Exchange a while ago, and then it was like a creative hub for musicians and managing tours for artists like Verite and a few others that I don't know. But,
sure.
But so in that sense, and I know you now work with a team of people, Generalist, is that correct? Generalist World?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell people what that means, Generalist World, because that's how I got to comment on your posts once.
Totally. Yeah, Generalist World is a media and a membership platform for leaders with nonlinear careers. So folks who have had some sort of squiggly path. And our goal is really to empower generalists to leverage their unique skills and thrive in a career, whatever that means to them. It could be, most of the time, it's a non-traditional path, but we do have folks. We have 650 people in our paid community that exists on Slack, and that's really just a hub where they can learn, they can connect, and unlock opportunities for themselves.
Okay, so you're a proud generalist, but do you get tired of explaining yourself to people who just don't get it? I mean,
It's a bit ironic because of my squiggly path. The "what do you do" question has always just filled me with a lot of dread. And so I've been fortunate enough to go around the world and back what feels like a gazillion times. And no matter what, inevitably that question comes up. Oh, well, what do you do? And for the most part, I typically just freeze and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you with that. And the first time that I've really been able to settle in and feel confident and feel comfortable in that response has been since finding Generalist World and the team of people that have been building it.
Well, I have an incredibly twisty, squiggly, whatever path because I'm so much older, and I mean I don't even want to go into that. But the thing is, that it's crazy how many where I began and where I am. It's insane.
Yeah.
So I had to get coaching about 5 years ago, individual, one-on-one, because the first thing was clarity was the first session, and Amy, my coach, said, so tell me all the things that are on your calendar. And we went through the calendar. Go, you have 17 projects that you like to do. You want to touch at least one of them every other day.
Right.
I said, I do. I said, I do. She goes, why? What is it about? Because I just like, I'm a spicy guy. I like to do this, that, the other.
Totally.
But none of this is making money. I go, you're right. But why is it about money? Yeah, but it's got to feel good. I said, you're right. I don't have all that money in the world. I mean, I used to, but not anymore. So yeah, do you need to make money? I said, yeah. So we went through the whole ikigai thing and blah, blah, blah. So
that's awesome.
So at the end of 16 weeks, we brought the 17 down to 4.
Wow.
I still had to have the 4.
I get that. I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's a portfolio career.
So you basically can't stand what Malcolm Gladwell talks about in Outlier, right?
Not at all.
I mean, truly, I freeze at the question even today. Like, if I'm at a meeting or a networking event or something like that, I go, so what do you do? I said, where do I start?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's.
So how do you answer that question today, though, when you're walking into rooms?
It depends on the level of spice and who the person is. If there's a rapport, like I think if I met you out in the wild and you asked me, I would probably say something to the effect of whatever needs to get done. And then that typically opens the door for a more in-depth conversation. But some people, so it depends on the person. I've had that fail multiple times. But in a lot of cases, that ends up meaning that person and I probably would not get along in the long run anyway. So that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that crazy that we worry about that? Oh, I really thought I could do something with this person, and they're walking away. On Wall Street, this is what happens. Oh, you're a trader. You're this. You're that. And if you're not one of those, then I don't want to talk to you because I can't make money from you.
Exactly. Typically, I would ask the other person first to get a little bit of an understanding of their context and the lens in which they view the world. And then I'm able to figure out what the starting point is. And because of my squiggly path, then I'm able to connect with them and meet them wherever they're at. And then that usually leads to being able to open up some sort of door.
So let's talk about what is squiggly for you. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I started out from the time that I was.
You make it sound like you're 100 years old, but go ahead.
I feel like it, depending on the day. My daughter's 8, and she makes me feel much older than I am. But
of course,
I started out when I was younger than her, actually. My uncle had given me a camera. And from that time, I was dead set on I'm going to be a photographer. And that was all I did. And when I entered into high school, I had been interning at all of the local newspapers. I ended up shooting for the yearbook and shooting all the local sports teams and doing all these things. And was always balancing and finding this weird friction between being very, very eclectic and being the artsy kid and being the photographer, but also being really nerdy, if we're honest. Right. And by the time senior year rolled around, it was this head-to-head combat around being president of National Honor Society, but again, being this really weird artsy kid. And when I ever decided to go to art school, everyone else who graduated top of the class was like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing your life away? And growing up in Rhode Island, you had a lot of kids who were going to Brown University. They're going to Harvard. They're going to Yale. Going to these prestigious institutions. So art school was like not going to happen. Right. And when I got there, I very quickly realized I was like, oh, like I love photography. I don't love everything else, nor am I good at any of these other modalities. And so ended up transferring, had to come back home to Rhode Island because some family stuff was going on, and ended up at a business school, primarily studying anthropology, which confused everyone. I wasn't confused. I knew that the head of the anthropology department was a photographer, and him and I had that baseline relationship, which ended up opening a lot of doors. But going from this being this weird artsy kid this weird nerdy kid at an arts college to then being the weird artsy kid at a business school was very confusing for everyone. And I was like, I hate it here. And my folks are like, you're not transferring again. So like, best of luck. We're going to stick it out. And my loophole was that it was mandatory, which my parents, they probably won't listen to this, maybe. But they thought that it was mandatory that I study abroad. And so I left and I went down to Chile. And that would not, in hindsight, be the first country I would recommend to someone who doesn't know Spanish. But nevertheless, ended up in Chile and ended up crossing paths with a kid in my program who we were the only students who did not speak Spanish. And I had my camera with me at all times. And he fancied himself a hip hop artist. And somehow we got to talking and he told me he was a rapper. He grew up in Ohio. He had a band. He had all these different things. I was like, oh, that's really cool. He was like, oh, you're a photographer? I was like, yeah, we're 18, 19. We're still trying to figure everything out. And somehow, Raju, between the two of us, our combined knowledge of Ola, his very real resemblance to Neo, if we're honest, and the big fancy camera, we booked shows the entire time that we were abroad for him.
God.
It was hilarious. And we thought, of course, again, you're 18, 19, very ignorant, whether you know it or not. And we booked a ton of shows. And when we came back, we were getting paid too. We're getting paid. We're getting free food. We're getting free drinks. We were like, listen, we made it. We're rock stars. So we came back to the States. I went back to Rhode Island. He went back to Ohio and attempted to do the same thing. He was like, you should be my manager. You're so organized. I'm like, yeah, my half a year in business school and my year at art school perfectly equips me to do this. This makes sense. And so we attempted to be booking shows here in the United States, and that totally went sideways. And it was very evident to me how jacked up the music industry was. And I was like, you want me to pay to play at your venues? You want us to sell these tickets? That's not how they were doing it in South America. This is really backwards. And that is where, as you mentioned earlier, Level Exchange came into the picture. And the idea was to bring fair trade principles to the music industry. And that started out originally just as an online platform that connected local bars, coffee shops, and restaurants to local musicians. And that was all based in Rhode Island.
Wow. Man, stories. I know you're a storyteller, so we're going to hear more stories from you. You say that generalists connect impossible dots, right? As you said, one of your things. Yeah. What's one dot you connected that even you wouldn't believe they would work?
I think the biggest swing that I had taken out of somewhat intentional ignorance was, in hindsight, it really cracks me up, and I understand why all those doors didn't open. But I was, like I said, 19, 20, and walking into the mayor's office in Providence, Rhode Island, and the governor's office, and all of these, city and state officials, and saying, like, music needs to have skin in the game here. We need to have policies around making sure that we have an industry. Like, you're not doing anything to support your local artists, and then you're complaining that all of these students, all these young people are leaving and they're going to Boston and they're going to New York City and they're flying out to Los Angeles. And that was one of the biggest dots that was so obvious to me. I was like, in Providence, we had 182,000 people. We had over 300 restaurants. It was just absurd, the restaurant per capita. And being able to go in and step into that and advocate on behalf of local artists was something that nobody had ever done before.
Wow. And it worked. I assume that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. And as I got further along in my Level Exchange journey, I got into touring and really started to see how the broader music industry was working, and very quickly realized in Rhode Island, we did not have a music industry. We had very talented artists, no doubt about that, but there was no infrastructure to support that. And I was on Warped Tour, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was on Warped Tour. And we had photographers and videographers following us around. And it clicked. I was like, oh, there is not a talent discrepancy between these acts who are on the road and the local acts that I work with, but it's more so it's the media, it's the content. And this was more than a decade ago. So this was before content was what it is now.
Right.
And so when I came back, I was like, yeah, we got to help them with content. And thankfully, we have Rhode Island School of Design and Brown University and 11 other colleges and universities in the state. And so we had tons of students who were really, really talented. And so then ended up opening a physical co-working and a production space for those artists and matchmaking with local photographers and videographers and engineers. And that's where really things started to snowball and make more of an impact.
So as I said earlier, I tend to focus on, or tend to attract, I should say, mid-level executives who are who have decided that they're unfulfilled in their jobs and going to go find something else to do. And then I help them find their gifts, right? That's kind of what we do. So ask you in that context, what's the most ridiculous advice someone's given you about picking a lane? Pick a lane. And then how did you shut it down?
The amount, oh gosh, I'm like, it's all flooding back in real time. The amount of times that I've gotten told to sit down, to shut up, to stay in your lane, I've had to tune it out at this point. And I think when I was in my 20s, I spent most of that time feeling very, very incompetent and very frustrated and didn't have the confidence ultimately to really advocate for myself. And it wasn't until honestly the last 5 years or so that I've been like, no, regardless of confidence, I have a whole stack of evidence that I am wildly competent and can do whatever it is that I would like to do, regardless of what anyone tells me. So I think it was just the general messaging of like, chill out, you're too much, just stop. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then little by little, I realized the importance of surrounding yourself with people who share similar values. And then being able to be insulated a little bit in that way was what allowed me to continue to grow.
Okay, so devil's advocate then in that context, isn't there a danger in being a journalist? When do you feel the pressure to go deep on one thing? I mean, when do you ever feel that pressure?
Oh, for sure. And I think the generalist versus specialist debate is just, it's a moot point. I would argue that it doesn't exist. If anything, being a generalist means that you are just stacking specialties. Like for me, I spent more than a decade as a photographer. I was shooting weddings and bar bat mitzvahs and just tons of different events and working at local newspapers. Like I know a ton about photography. And just because I don't slap the label on myself as a photographer anymore doesn't mean that I don't have that skill. And it's interesting in the generalist world community, we have people who are PhDs. I can think of a dozen people who have their PhDs. And so it's always funny when people talk about the generalist versus specialist debate because it's like, that's not really what it's about.
Exactly.
I think it's more, being a generalist to me is much more so just the lens that you choose to look out into the world and being open to different possibilities. And to your point, there are times where it is advantageous to have that aperture fully opened versus sometimes it can be far too much. And you need to.
I'm thinking of my clients who are probably listening and saying, listen, I've been a manager or leader for 20 years doing this, right? Whether it's a Wall Street person or it could be, manufacturing, we're leading a team of people to do sales, who knows, whatever. So that's we all think from let's say the convergence of the ikigai where, what the world needs and what I need and what's my passion, blah, blah, blah. And so when you're narrowing down what your choice is to quit your job and do something different, it comes down to, everybody would advise them to, pick your dot, pick your very small specialty, because that's all you know. And then of course, that's the comfort you have to step into the world, and then maybe you will do other things. So how do you convince leaders that are hiring, different, right? Is it a nice to have, but it's a business necessity to be a journalist? I mean, let's say when you're working in Generalist World community.
Yeah, I think when we're talking to a lot of folks who are looking more towards the future of work, which is very ambiguous. A lot of people talk about that. Really, we're thinking about it more through like, what are the jobs of the future? The jobs of 2050 are not the jobs that we're doing now. The jobs of 2050 are going to be jobs that require creativity, that require everyone's favorite buzzword, innovation, and that will ultimately require cross-disciplinary skills. If the bet that we have taken, that I'm willing to bet as well is with AI, the rise of AI coming up, specialist skills are going to continue to get taken over and automated.
Yep. Agreed.
And that is what it is.
So
and so that then, right. So that then leaves, okay, and then what? Well, then you need people who can connect those dots, huh?
Yeah.
And who are all of those people? We got them.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is really where it comes in, where it's not generalist versus AI or generalist versus specialist or generalist versus anybody. It is generalist and specialist, generalist and AI. And what does that then look like? The more and more, if you look closely, even I saw the other day, NASDAQ of all companies was hiring somebody, and in the job description said, if you identify as a multi-hyphenate or a generalist, this will be for you. And so you're starting to see it more and more, even with these bigger institutions that have, long track records.
So I should feel good. Oh my God. Okay.
Well, it's the translation of all the skills, all of the experiences that you have. I think people spend a lot of time glorifying the heroes time and time again. And the reality is the people who are going out and taking up all of the space aren't necessarily doing all of the work. It's the gatherers and the dot connectors who are doing all of the things behind the scenes. And that's a different skill in and of itself.
Yep. Awesome. So energy is a big theme in your work. I mean, we all hear energetic, energy, but I don't mean that physical energy, but you know what I'm talking about. So how do you help teams figure out, or people that, if there are clients, I guess you're in the marketing side of Generalist World, or is that fair to say, or
all of it?
All of it. Okay. So energy is a big theme in your work. How do you help teams figure out what lights them up and what's draining them to death on the other side? So
for sure.
Yeah.
A big part of that actually comes back to a lot of the methodologies that I learned studying anthropology during undergrad, and just from a research lens. So a lot of times, like when bigger, especially larger organizations, when they'll hire me and or the Generalist World team in some configuration, folks are coming in and they hire us and they say, we're having some sort of crisis.
Right.
Okay, great. And why is that? And if and when the leader who approaches us is open enough to truly being transparent, that's where we're able to make the biggest leaps and bounds. And so when folks come in, we're able to, like I said, if they're open to it, I'm able to get one-on-ones with a majority of the team. And typically these are teams of like 10 to 12. So we're not talking like 500, 600 person teams. But if we can get one-on-one time in which the leader themselves has been open and transparent, which then allows the team to then be open and transparent, we're able to get very much into the weeds of what's going on. And being able to diagnose the problems that are going on, not the problem that they came to us originally for, which tends to be a chasm between those two. And then we go through and we do audits, whether it's an energy audit and or a skills audit, and then map that to what are they doing day to day. And then to your point, what you went through with your coach of looking at the calendar and being like, well, what is actually taking up your time? And how can we tweak that to figure out how to align that? And we're getting it to the point where 80% of the time they're doing things that actually are in flow for what they want to do. And obviously everyone's going to do some things they don't totally love, but we try to keep that more to that 20%.
Okay. So let's talk about the Generalist World. I mean, maybe talk about the founder, how it came about, and then I guess you're part of this team, the core team.
Yeah.
And what happens in the example you were just giving? What happens after that?
Yeah, totally. So with Generalist World, Millie Tomedy is the founder. She started this 2.5-3 years ago. And I got connected to her through a mutual friend of ours, Ash Phillips, who is based over in the UK. And he, in a lot of ways, feels like the male version of me on the other side of the pond. And he was like, have you ever met Millie? I was like, no. He's like, have you heard of Generalist World? No. He was like, oh, no problem. Next thing you get the email. And Millie and I hopped on a call, and instantly it was like, oh my gosh, like where have you been all my life? This is fantastic. And from there ended up the first engagement that we had was we launched a podcast together. It's called Generally Curious. And that started to go really well. And then over the last 2 years, it just became more and more clear as we brought on, she had been working with a community manager, Etcha, and this other woman, Nikita, and the four of us just worked together very, very well. And from a values perspective, the alignment couldn't be more on point, which allows it to work so well. And all of the way that it's structured is all of us are our own entities. And so that was done very intentionally. We're all contractors essentially hiring each other, which works out most of the
I
time.
know that model. That's what I
Yeah,
use.
exactly. And so it's like nobody is taking on more risk than the other, and we're all able to, share the resources that come in and out, and we're also able to continue to do our own consulting work. And I think the beautiful part about it is when projects come in, like I do a lot of freelance consulting work, and so when projects come in that I might not be a good fit for, but maybe they are, and so we're able to share that, and or we call it our conveyor belt method, because there's lots of things that I really don't enjoy doing. That's some of them really enjoy doing.
So Generalist World is an entity, or is it not really an entity?
Generalist World is Millie's entity.
Millie's entity.
Yep,
Okay.
and
so
it's
you
based
guys collaborate as and when
in the UK.
you need.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
the example you were giving about a person coming in and you do all these things one-on-one, what happens to that person, and what's the business model?
Yeah, typically for that, a lot of those clients, like I've been working with for the most part, and those will come in. Everything else, when it comes to the main business model for Generalist World, is the membership and is our digital products. And so we have courses, we have the podcast, we have the newsletter, and so that's where most of that revenue is generated from.
And then each of the people that are in that core team do their own work, as you said.
Yes.
So the members are getting all the access to your programs, et cetera, and tools to build their businesses, if you will. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. The content and the tools, it's workshops, it's newsletters, it's the Generally Curious podcast. It's a lot of practical resources like job search guides and financial planning.
So isn't there a contradiction there, Lindsey? Because you're saying generalist, but then these people who have multiple skills, it's like, how do I match this skill set and solution proclivity to solve that problem? I mean, it's like, how do you do that? They still have to do that. Still have to be a specialist on that particular problem they're solving, right? Because the client's not going to use them if they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to how you define generalist. And like I said earlier, it's really like I think about it as the lens in which I view the world. Like someone's not going to hire me to be their chief marketing officer. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. If you tell me I only have to do marketing all day, every day, no, thank you. Is that part of the skill set that I have? Yes. And so if you bring me on to do a contract or a project, or you hire me part-time, whatever it is, like you're getting the ability to bring in all of the other resources. Like, for example, I have a client who hired me recently. We met at a conference. He coaches 7 to 9 figure CEOs. There's really no other universe in which we probably would have crossed paths. On the outside, it's a very funny match. And he happened to hear me talking about community, which is something that I'm very passionate about. I could talk about it all day. And it perked his interest because he was like, oh, well, that's it. I've been thinking about building a community. Could you help me with that? Of course. And so the initial engagement was, we're going to talk about community. I'm going to give you the tips, tricks, tools, and habits that I know to build a successful one, or as successful as, we've been able to build Generalist World. And then now the aperture has opened up even more. And now we're working on AI automations. We're working on email sequences. We're working on social media. And so it's really, that's why I say it comes down to the being based on the same values and having that open-mindedness to be able to continue to expand and or contract the scope of work over time.
Well, this is all unfolding as we speak. So Lindsey, if someone feels stuck because they've been told that you're too much, you're too scattered, like I was saying earlier, what's your advice for leaning into that range instead of hiding it?
Yeah, we run a workshop called How to Turn Your Range into Revenue. The two main things that we talk about in that are developing your one-liner, which is just succinctly taking all the things that you do and putting it into a sentence.
One-liner, yeah.
And then the other thing that we talk about is developing your skill stack. And the skill stack, the way that we define it, is based off of our 4 C's. And we define those as your core skills, your complementary skills, your compassion skills, and your context skills. And so for all of these, like, yes, it's called a one-liner, but the reality is, because you have range, you can have multiple different one-liners. For me, when I'm out, I have a one-liner in the back of my head that is for music industry people. I have a one-liner in the back of my head that's for more geared towards startups, tech, VCs. I have another one-liner that's specific to Generalist World. And then it's going to leave the breadcrumbs so that I can talk about something else if and when I want to talk about it.
So you have to be in the right setting. I see.
Correct. Yes. Sentence setting.
Okay, so if I told you to pick a single lane, let's say right now, just for fun, what would it be? And why would you leave it 5 minutes later?
What would the single lane be? I think.
Just remember, you're going to exit in 5 minutes.
I would focus. I think I would probably. Honestly, I'm going backwards in a lot of ways and getting more back into music and into art.
I see.
Okay. And it's interesting. I think a lot of people. Another thing that we talk about within the Generalist World community is obviously, or maybe not obviously, to folks who are listening, but I hate to break it to you, but the career ladder is dead. It has been knocked over and smushed to smithereens. Never to be seen again, we hope.
Exactly.
And so with that, we've been thinking about it more as a career flywheel and how you as a generalist with your range, to your point, can take a thing that you're good at it and leverage it to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. So it's not to say you are just focusing on a thing or what have you, but it's more like I've been thinking about, what 2025 is going to look like and where do I want to allocate my time. And part of that is I want to focus more on music production, just as a skill that I would like to learn. I owned a studio, and yet I never knew how to do music production. And so, like I said, in a lot of ways, like going back and revisiting with the knowledge that I have now to things that I've done in the past and continuing to leverage those off of each other.
Awesome. So do you work remotely because you have a daughter, or how does that work for you in your life?
Yeah, for Generalist World or for work in general? Both.
I don't know. Pick.
You're
one person. You're one person. So
Well, the Generalist World team is very funny because Millie, the founder, lives in the Scottish Highlands. And so the funny thing is she lives on an island that is the size of Manhattan. And yet my little island here has 8 million people. Her little island has 191. So a bit of a difference. And then Nikita lives in London, and Etcha is from Turkey, but she lives in Manchester. And so
it's okay. So you're
we get together. Anyway. Yeah, we get together 2 or 3 times a year. We just all met up in Turkey about a month and a half ago, which was a blast. And then all the other work that I do, for the most part, is remote. I love traveling. I love traveling more than anything else.
Well,
hands down.
It's a great part of the world because I love the Highlands, single malls and things like that. But okay, we won't go there now.
There we go. We'll meet up there. It'll be perfect. It's all coming together.
I think I'm going to be in it.
See?
So what's one team dynamic, Lindsey, given all the work you've been doing, that always makes you roll your eyes? Like, and how do you fix it?
I think the biggest thing one of the biggest things that keeps me up at night is accommodations for. Not even accommodations is the wrong word, but it is the fact that just acknowledging the fact that people work differently. And that is something that I see over and over and over and over again. And as somebody who is neurodivergent, who ends up working with a bunch of neurodivergent people, that's something that comes up time and time again. And it's not the lack of their skills, it's not the lack of their training, it's not the lack of their abilities, it's to your point earlier about the setting that they are in. If you put me in an office building with fluorescent lights every single day from 9 to 5 after sitting on a train to get to the office, you're not going to get anything good.
That's right.
I can promise you that. So I think that's the part where it's incredibly antiquated in a lot of ways. And so we see that a lot, or I see that a lot when going into companies. And it's very, very frustrating because if you're able to align people better with energy and the ways in which they work, you're able to get so much more productivity out of them than if you just continue to force them into doing something the way that you would like them to do it.
So I have a few rapid fire coming. Like this has already been rapid fire in a way, right? But I have a few more. So let's end on the main point about, future of work is like McKinsey's, big whatever out there.
Sure.
Everything's future work. Is there something, apart from we all know that there'll be more robots than human beings in maybe 10 years if Elon Musk had his way, whatever.
Right.
I know we're not going to be working for robots, but we're going to be enhancing the robots as I see it in the future of work and you need to be creative as a result.
Totally.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what it boils down to, to your point about rapid fire, adaptability is the new competitive advantage. And a lot of people have a very, very difficult time in discomfort.
Mm.
And so the more comfortable that you can get in being uncomfortable, which I'm sure, I mean, you're a coach. I'm sure you deal with this all the time. This is what coaching is. And
Right.
so being able to get comfortable in that discomfort. The future of work, who the heck knows what's going to happen? It's unpredictable. But that ability to connect dots across disciplines is becoming more and more valuable than ever before. And I think the biggest thing, and maybe this is something that I want versus what will happen, but my hope is that we have much more collaboration over competition. That's something that
I
I'm
agree.
deeply excited about. I think the other part about it too is that especially in the United States, diversity. I've always believed that diversity is what drives innovation. And more, like we are going to have more and more people. White folks are going to be less and less and less. And people of color are going to be more and more and more and more. And so what happens to a country like the United States when that happens, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think people need to start really wrapping their minds around that, especially, we're living in a time in which DEI is being cut, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so I do think that whether it's diversity of age, gender, race, sexual orientation, you name it, and or just the workplace in terms of specialists collaborating with generalists and leveraging everyone's unique skills. I think diversity is going to be something that is going to need to be navigated with a little bit more delicately than it has been.
Well, I see that as unique gifts of each person coming together.
100%.
Not rather than just saying,
Yeah.
I have this gift, so I'm going to just do that. You can, of course.
Exactly. And that's what we're seeing now. The more you light
other candles, it's better, right?
Totally. And I think it's interesting that we're seeing so many people who are going down this solopreneur path. And again, like I live in a certain bubble on LinkedIn, so I know that I see more of it than other people. But at some point, I'm like, well, you can only have so many individual people selling one certain skill over and over and over again. And so how does that play out? I don't know.
Yeah,
and I think the biggest thing with, we've talked about the rise of AI is we need more people who have actual emotional intelligence. We can automate our way out of a lot of things.
That's right. And it's going to automate us.
True.
And we're going to be frustrated with that too. So
exactly.
Yeah. Human beings are just designed in our current consciousness, just designed to complain. And
correct.
There's always be something external bugging you, and then you just make that your big focus. So that's my big bugaboo. So coming back to the people who are either watching, listening, hopefully your audience and my audience, are if they're stuck in a job for 20 years and they know that a CFO no longer is, feels like the CFO because of everything else that's going on around them.
Right.
And the companies are integrating, transforming through AI, innovation, blah, 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 whatever. What are they going to do? So it's about, and they worry that they don't have any skills. And the point is that, you better get them now if you're worried about getting skills. But, just exploring multiple facets. Like in my example, 5 years ago, I couldn't get on a video. It took me 3 years to get on the first video. And unless I was in an accountability group where there's someone told me, I need 14 straight days from you, a video, even if it's 30 seconds, I want it every single day. And then I sent it to him and he said, Chris said, not to me. I want you to post it on YouTube or Facebook. I said, are you out of your mind? I said, to introduce me on camera took me 17 takes.
I'm right there with you.
But you're a public speaker. I said, yeah, this was during COVID. But in the public, I can speak about any subject. I mean, that I'm good at. I'll speak. But when it comes to a dumb camera, it's just a green light. I don't know who to talk to.
Oh, I get that. I totally get that.
But now I have a podcast. Like, what? Okay, well, it's okay. I'm talking to somebody. But, I have courses I create. I just talk to the camera because I'm just engaged to make a difference to whoever's on the other side. So I love guys or gals listening to this who are still sitting on the fence of how, don't think too much. Just get in the arena.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's recognizing staying, in the same place, quote unquote, for 20 years doesn't mean that you're stagnant, doesn't mean that you're stuck. Yeah. You have gained so many skills, experience, and insights that are uniquely yours. You just don't recognize it because you're constantly in that same lane. If you hop over a lane, all of a sudden, I mean, even, it's around the holidays. When I get out of my bubble and I go home and I visit family and they're like, oh, what are you up to? In my immediate circle, that's normal. When I go home, they're like, you did what? Excuse me, how? And so it's switching up that perspective.
Yes, exactly. All right, rapid fire, very quickly, okay?
Okay.
That doesn't mean you have to go rapid. It just means I have to go rapid.
Sure.
Okay, creativity or strategy?
Oh, come on.
Obvious. I know it's obvious.
That's so hard. That's really hard. My gut says creativity, and then immediately I'm like, but how would you get anywhere without strategy? Creativity.
Okay, all right. One generalist that you know of you admire.
One. Gotta limit me here.
I could even say living or dead, but okay, fine. Pick any. I don't think there are any dead generalists, or are there? I guess they're all generalists.
There's a ton of dead ones, you know?
That's right, yeah.
Oh man. These are worse than the other questions. My goodness.
They were bad questions.
No, they're not bad. They're amazing questions. They're just difficult for me to answer.
That's okay.
So I admire so many people. I mean, I'll give credit where credit is due to Millie for starting Generalist World.
Great. Worst career advice you ever received?
Worst career advice. My worst career advice. So this was recent too. Clearly, they didn't read the room. I had a woman tell me that because things are so unstable and so uncertain, and because of her connections, and she was willing to help me out, she would be willing to help me get a job in finance.
Okay. I won't touch that one.
Good idea.
Your go-to episode when you need inspiration. Go-to podcast episode.
I am a very, very big fan of several podcasts, but the one that I listen to over and over again is We Can Do Hard Things by Glennon Doyle.
What's her name?
Glennon Doyle.
Glennon Doyle.
Okay. Yeah, big fan of that.
Adding to my list. Okay. I think we've covered this, but finish this sentence. The future of work is...
The future of work is generalist.
Good. Favorite city to get lost in?
Oof. My favorite city to get lost in is Barcelona.
Okay. What's the most unconventional tool in your toolkit?
Tour managing.
Ooh, you're headed that way, huh? Aren't you? Again.
Those skills can be applied anywhere.
Okay. If you had to write a song about your career, what would the title be?
That's a good one. If I were to write a song, the title would be... Oof. That's a good one. What's yours? I need some inspiration here.
Oh, come on.
We'll keep it simple. Uncharted Rhythm.
That's good enough. That's beautiful. Something I haven't thought of will be my title.
Ooh, like that.
All right. One question you wish more people would ask you.
Honestly, I think in general, I just wish that people were more curious.
Ooh, my biggest bugaboo.
Yes. That really, really, really bothers me.
Okay, lastly, what's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice that I have ever received is, I will caveat this by saying, in certain contexts. So do not take this and apply it for inappropriate things. In certain contexts, in the context in which I was told. No stands for new opportunity.
Oh, I like that.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Very well. So, are there any last-minute parting words from my audience to say, God, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do?
Don't panic. If you ever need to be talked off a ledge, call me. We'll figure it out. There is a solution. And to also just stay curious. And to stay curious not only about, everyone else, but about yourself. And actually, don't be afraid to ask yourself the same questions that you're asking other people.
Great. And so are you findable? People can
Yes,
find you?
absolutely.
Okay.
Mostly
So
on LinkedIn.
Yep. So I'll put that in the show notes and
Yeah,
they can reach out to you.
that sounds great.
Okay. Well, in the season of gratitude here, thank you for being here and short notice. And as I said, we didn't really know each other, but
Yeah,
I
we
had
do.
the sense that this was going to be fun, and it was fun. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
And in
thank you
that
so
same
much.
vein, is there anything that you discovered on this call, last 45 minutes?
Yeah, I appreciate your sharing of bits and pieces of your own journey, but also the advocating for the people that you're coaching and the pain points that they're struggling with. And I think that's where part of the curiosity and the empathy comes in, because I think a lot of people assume that if people have followed a more traditional path, that things are okay for them, that things are stable for them, and they might be financially stable, they might be secure in some way, but really pointing out, and again, creating those points of empathy for folks who maybe they're financially successful, but they are not fulfilled in that way.
Awesome. All right. Any last words of wisdom for the people like, oh, we're stuck on this precipice of, oh, where do I go? Not to jump off the ledge, but just
No, definitely not that. I think it's just, what is the smallest executable step that you can take? And a lot of times it's a simple thing as sending a text message, making a phone call, sending an email, or even doing a Google search to set you off in the right direction.
always said, just start.
Exactly.
Just stop thinking too much before you take action. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks again for being here, Lindsey. It's a pleasure. And you are a force of nature. And I'm just can't wait to see your progress
so
and for sure guaranteed success.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me, Raju.
My pleasure. Take care.
Cheers.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye. Thank you, my friend, for tuning in to another episode of Bold Conscious Connections. If you really enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, please, and subscribe for more inspiring stories and insights from top entrepreneurs and leaders. So that button is right below here. And also hit the notification bell, that thing next to subscribe, so you'll never miss another episode and any of our latest content that I post, usually every week. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions, so drop them in the comments below. I would really love to hear more about what I'm doing and maybe bring you something that's more suitable for what you like and other things that you might want to learn about. So join our vibrant community of individuals who are out there making a difference. Okay? Stay tuned for more amazing conversation that will inspire and empower you. And until next time, remember, live boldly and consciously, my friend.